Hey everybody, Antoni here with a review of Arabella, which was shown at the Het Muziektheater. The conductor was Mark Albrecht. The production was by Christoph Loy. The set design and costumes were by Herbert Muraure. The lights were handled by Reinhard Traub, and the choreography was by Thomas Willem. Now, as much as I really love Strauss's huger, more dramatic operas like Elektra, Salome, and Frau ohne Schatten, I really have to say that I am a huge fan of his lyrical comedies like Rosenkavalier, Ariadne auf Naxos, and tonight's opera, Arabella. Yes, Arabella is definitely an opera that has placed something very special in my heart because, well, like the composer, Richard Strauss, I myself am also totally in love with the soprano voice. Whether I hear any soprano sing a beautifully placed high C or high A, B, hell, even an F or D or E, I definitely have goosebumps running up my spine because, well, let's face it, Richard Strauss wrote the most beautiful, the most intimate, and the most heartfelt music for a soprano, especially when it comes to the four last songs. Those can either be sung by a soprano or a tenor, but the composer definitely favored the soprano voice. Hence, that's why operas like Salome, Elektra, Rosenkavalier, Ariadne auf Naxos, Arabella, Die ägyptische Helene, Die Liebe vom Danae, and Capriccio and Intermezzo have become, oh, and also Die Schweigsame Frau, have become household names, especially when it comes to a soprano performing all of these roles. And Arabella was definitely a treat. I also have the DVD from a production from Glyndebourne, which was from the 80s, starring Ashley Putnam and Gianna Rolandi as the sisters, and I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. So yes, Strauss's Arabella is definitely my most favorite lyrical comedies from the various works that he has. And I have to say, with such beautiful music and a very touching story, not to mention at times quite exciting, that basically talks about gender roles in society, especially when it comes to the aristocrats, and a lot of other things that basically get tackled in this opera, like fidelity. You cannot go wrong with Arabella. It is definitely such a treat. Now, going into the production, I thought it was pretty good all around. Christoph Loy is really well known for his minimalist productions because he basically focuses on the psychological aspects of the characters. That's pretty much his forte. And when it comes to his productions, they have the tendency to be very minimalist or stray a bit from the source material that's usually based in, or in this case, the libretto that's usually based in. Now, Arabella is originally set in the early 1900s, or let's say 1910s or 1920s. But in this production, this is basically set in, let's say, the 1940s or the 1950s. And then we have these walls that either open or close or move from side to side, basically showing who's the main focus of this scene or what's happening now. And then in the first scene, we see that the hotel that the Waldner family are staying in basically has that 1930s feel. And then when they're in the ball, it doesn't really have that grand 1800s feel. It definitely has that type of 20th, 21st century feel, as if though that they're in some reception for something that's very fancy, but mostly, well, from a later time, from like the 50s, or even from the early 2000s. So yes, the production is actually quite interesting all around. And let me just say that the costumes were absolutely great to look at. I especially love Adelaida's ball gown. It was just gorgeous, especially that of Arabella's. Now, Arabella in this production basically wears a little black dress, well, in the first scene, and then Zdenka gets to wear the little black dress in the final act. I thought that was pretty cute. And then she wears a sky blue ball gown in the second act and also in the third act. Zdenka, Arabella's sister, as I was about to say, basically, well, she's in her usual boy clothes, though she has a cap on, and then inside her cap is her long, flowing hair, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. I thought it basically heightened her beauty. Even though she is a tomboy at a very early age, she does have a little bit of femininity, especially evidenced when she has her feelings confessed, well, by her, when it comes to her confessing her feelings to Matteo and to the rest of her family. Then we really see just wow. So overall, the production all around was quite interesting. Minimalist, but it was quite good to look at. And the costumes, I have to say, were actually really pretty all around. Yet the singing is what really made this opera stand out for me. And in the role of Arabella, we have Jacquelyn Wagner. Now, Arabella basically requires a full lyric soprano or even that of a spinto soprano to sing all of those florid and very melodious lyrics and all of those notes very seamlessly, though at the same time have a little bit more meat in her voice compared to her younger sister Zdenka. She's basically like a younger version of the Marschallin, and with a little bit of Chrysothemis in her voice. And let me just tell you that I definitely loved Jacquelyn Wagner in this role. I thought she had such a silvery and very gorgeous instrument that instantly reminded me of past singers like Eleanor Steber and Lisa Della Casa and Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. I feel that she was absolutely magnificent in her portrayal as Arabella. She not only had such a gorgeous instrument, but her acting was really quite good all around. She was able to play Arabella as a very prim and proper and very wise young lady because, yes, she is pretty much the only sane woman, well, say for Zdenka, that makes both the sisters the only sane women of this entire mess. So yes, Miss Wagner was able to play Arabella as a cool, calm, and collected young woman who is also very young and has a lot of passion and a lot of admiration, and she really cares for her younger sister Zdenka. So, all in all, Miss Wagner definitely gave such a beautiful portrayal in the title role. And then in the role of Zdenka, we have Swedish soprano Agneta Eichenholz. Now, the role of Zdenka is actually very interesting because the thing about Zdenka is that vocally, she has to have a lighter voice than that of Arabella, which makes sense because Zdenka can either be sung by a lyric coloratura soprano, a dramatic coloratura soprano, or even a light lyric soprano. Basically, she's a lyric soprano with coloratura tendencies because of the high notes that she has to hit, whether it's a B, or a B flat, or even a C during her duet with Arabella in Act 1. And I have to say, Miss Eichenholz was just wonderful all around. I even have her DVD as Lulu from the Royal Opera House. She was fantastic in that opera. I even love her more as Zdenka Basically, for those of you not in the know of Agneta Eichenholz, she's very well known in singing repertoire from the coloratura repertoire to that of the light lyric and even that of the full lyric soprano repertoire, and even venturing into some of the roles of the dramatic coloratura repertoire. Basically, her repertoire spans from singing a little bit of bel canto and Verdi to singing that of Strauss, a little bit of Wagner, Britten, Berg, and in a few years from now, she's going to sing some more stuff from Janacek. So yes, I thought she was an absolutely beautiful foil to Miss Wagner's Arabella. She has that silvery timbre that she is so well loved for, and her tone was just glistening all around. It was just like bubbling champagne. Yes, bubbling champagne that just really tingles me all around. And her acting as Zdenka was so full of passion, so full of pathos, and I basically rooted for her to have her a happy ending. It was just a very touching portrayal of one of my favorite characters in this opera, and also a fan favorite. Well, being Zdenka, because of such beautifully gorgeous music that she sings, whether it's her solo number Sie wollen alle Geld or the vocal lines in which she takes part with her sister in the duet Aber der Richtige. Yes, Miss Eichenholz was just wonderful as Zdenka. With such a silvery timbre and a magnificent stage presence, I was absolutely touched right here by her performance. And then we get to the men, well, the main lovers first, with Mandrika being sung by James Rutherford. Now, Mandrika is a role that requires a dramatic baritone with such a powerful voice to sing such strong and very powerful notes, at the same time be gentlemanly in his approach to the character. I thought that James Rutherford did very wonderfully as Mandrika. He was just fantastic vocally. He had such a round and very rich voice, and it's also because of the many Verdi operas and Wagner operas that he sings. As I've read his biography, in the Verdi repertoire he sang roles like Giorgio Germont, and then in the Wagner repertoire he sang roles like Hans Sachs. I thought his experience in the Verdi and Wagner repertoire helped him in this role. He basically plays Mandrika as a very passionate and very ebullient man with a huge dream and lots of willpower. That's what he really gave throughout this entire evening. He had such a huge amount of energy, and his voice was in tip-top shape. Sure, the high notes at times can be a bit sharp, but other than that, I thought it was just a great instrument all around, and a very, very engaging stage presence that he had with such an ebullient character like Mandrika. So overall, he was just fantastic. In the role of Matteo, who is Zdenka's lover, though at first Arabella's admirer, we have Will Hartmann, who I also saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin as Latza from Janufa, and I also have him on DVD as Tamino from Magic Flute. Now, the thing about Matteo is that he has to have a very meaty sounding voice, not too meaty, not too light, but mostly in the area of being that of a full lyric tenor or a spinto tenor. Basically, he has a lot of florid lines and some high notes that he sings. He has a high B in Act 3, as I've heard. So basically, it's a huge sing all around. Not to mention, he has to have a lot of great acting chops. as if he's playing this man who is very passionate, very, well, youthful, yet at times very impulsive. I thought that Will Hartman did this role to a T. Yes, Mr. Hartman is very well known for playing such passionate and very impulsive characters like his Tamino from the Royal Opera House and his Latza from Deutsche Oper Berlin are pretty much evidence for me. He also sang Don José at one time in a German opera theater. Hearing him as Matteo, I have to say, was a huge treat for me. He had such a huge and gorgeous and powerful voice that was just sung very, very well. He used his instrument to his greatest advantage, even when it comes to all of those difficult lines. He uses it very well. And he played Matteo to a T as this impassioned, yet quite impulsive young man who knows that Arabella will be his, even though he'll end up dying for her, even though he has to commit suicide, though he knows from the start that maybe there will be someone else who loves him body and soul. And in the end, it turns out to be Zdenka. Yes, I thought that Will Hartman was another fantastic performer. He was just so magnificent. I mean, he's always been magnificent. Look no further than his Tamino from the Royal Opera House. Sure, it was a bit hefty, but overall his Tamino was absolutely well sung and well played. But his Latza was definitely the selling point for me. And just like with Matteo, it was just gorgeous. And it was just so full of passion and fire that I was totally glued to the edge of my seat just by watching him on stage. And then we have The Parents, sung by Basso Alfred Reiter, singing the role of Count Theodor Waldner. And then we have The Mother, sung by Charlotte Margiona. She basically sang the role of Adelaide Waldner. Now let's go to the basso, Alfred Reiter, as Theodor Waldner. I thought he was just fantastic all around. Sure, his voice was a bit woolly, but he got better later on in Act 3. His stage presence was pretty sympathetic at best, and in the most positive way possible. I thought he was just so magnificent. He basically painted such a very beautiful picture of a very emphatic and very kind father, especially to Zdenka. Yet also very understanding. And he's pretty much a gentle soul, especially to his two daughters. And when there are times that he has to be rough, he pretty much goes all out when it comes to Arabella's little affairs, or even that of this whole mix-up between Mandrika and Arabella, Zdenka and Mandrika, Zdenka, Arabella, Matteo, Zdenka, Matteo. Wow. It's just all over the place. Yes, he basically shows a lot of passion and a lot of fire in this role. Yet he plays this role with such dignity and such a beauty that cannot be missed. And then we have, before I forget, lest I forget about the Count Waldner, he basically has to be sung by either a character basso or even that of a basso profondo with some solid top notes and very solid low notes. So basically, he can either be sung by a character basso or even that of a basso cantante or a basso profondo, just as long as his tone all around is homogeneous. And I thought that Mr. Reiter's tone all throughout was just homogeneous. And then we proceed to the mother, Adelaide Wagner. Now, the thing about Adelaide is that even though she doesn't really have a lot to sing, she basically has to be sung by a dramatic contralto, or even that of a dramatic mezzo, with good top notes. And my goodness, Charlotte Marjona did just that. For those of you not in the know who Charlotte Marjona was, she basically started off her career in the 80s and 90s as a lyric soprano, and then when the 2000s came, she basically specialized in a lot more spinto soprano and dramatic soprano roles. Her full lyric roles back in the 90s were those of Pamina, Donna Elvira, and the Countess, and also Fiordiligi. She basically specialized in a lot of Mozart roles. And then we have her spinto repertoire in the 2000s, where she sang Sieglinde, Elsa, and the Marschallin. Yet she also sang some character mezzo roles like Marcellina from Marriage of Figaro. And here she is nowadays singing some mezzo roles. She's pretty much on the same path with the likes of Annie Schlemm and Anya Cilia. And here I thought, well, Miss Marjona still does a fantastic job in the mezzo repertoire. I thought she wasn't really going to make it because I thought she was going to wobble around. But I was wrong. I was totally wrong. Instead, she still had her very strong and very, very organized instrument that was just so beautiful to listen to all throughout. Yes, even though she doesn't really have a lot to sing, she has such a gorgeous instrument that she uses very, very effectively. And her stage presence as Adelaide was just gorgeous all around. There was a lot of flawless singing and flawless acting from Madame Marjona. And then we have the role of the three suitors, Elema, sung by Marcel Rayons, Dominique, sung by Roger Smeets, and then we have Count Lamoral, sung by Thomas Dea. Now, Count Elema basically requires a light lyric tenor or even that of a full lyric tenor. He basically has to be vocally different than that of Matteo, whose vocal lines are a lot more dramatic and a lot more passionate. But with Elema, sure, there are times that he can be dramatic, but naturally his lines are very lyrical all throughout. And I thought that Mr. Rayans was just absolutely fantastic. He had such a solid lyric tenor instrument that he used to such a fantastic advantage. His notes were very well placed, they were all well sung, and his acting was really solid. It was such a beautiful and very engaging instrument that really caught me by the heart. It was just that fantastic. He had no gimmick. It was a natural sounding tone that was brought out so gorgeously, and he had such a fantastic technique as well. And then we have Roger Smeets as Dominic. Now, Dominic basically requires a lyric baritone. Basically, he's supposed to sound a little bit differently or a little bit similar to that of Manteca. Manteca is a little bit heftier, or a lot heftier than that of Dominic. Dominic is basically a little bit more lyrical. He's basically sung by a lyric baritone, or even that of a character baritone, might I add. And here I thought Roger Smeets was just absolutely fantastic. He had such a focused instrument that he used very well, almost sounding like a tenor, yet his stage presence was absolutely engaging as well. So that's all I could really say for Mr. Smeets as Dominic. He had such a beautiful instrument and a very engaging stage presence, especially when all three suitors were like on the corner of each wall, pining, and then after that, in the third act, they basically leave the Waldner family and their loved ones alone. Yeah. And then we have Count Lamoral, sung by Thomas Deer. Now, Lamoral basically requires a character basso to sing this role. He doesn't really have to sound any bigger than that of Wagner, but it's safe to say that he's not only supposed to be sung by, or he basically doesn't just need a character basso role, but he also has to have some fantastic acting chops as well. And here I thought that Thomas Deer was just absolutely great. He had such a great and solid technique and a very involving stage presence. So overall, all three suitors were just absolutely fantastic. All three of them sang their parts very well, and they acted their parts extremely well. And then we have the ever difficult role of the coloratura soprano role of the Fiaccamilli, sung by Susanna Elmark, who hails all the way from Sweden and is a very well-known interpreter of the Queen of the Night, Constanze, and Zerbinetta. Now, Fiaccamilli is like a mini Zerbinetta. She's another one of those difficult lyric coloratura soprano roles that has a lot of high notes, yodeling, and every other, term that associates with the term of coloratura, whether it's arpeggios, scales, yodeling, or even those of the high notes. She hits a high D so often, and she yodels a lot, especially in that passage in her aria Die Wiener Herren verstehen sich. She yodels again with her little scene with Mantica. And basically, it's a very challenging role for any lyric coloratura soprano. She basically has to have very ringing top notes and a very charming, witty, and very energetic stage presence. What more can you say? The Fiaccamilli is basically the mascot of the coach's ball. With what? Her riding attire, her riding crop, and a lot of energy that she puts on the crowd. In this production, she basically wore a white dress with frills on her skirt and, white Mary Janes, white stockings, and she was blonde, and she had a very huge whip. I thought that was actually pretty fun to watch her. Now, Susanna Elmark as the Fiaccamilli, I thought was just wow. She was a vocal tour de force. Even though this role is quite minute and it is so thankless, especially for a coloratura soprano, I thought she sang her role very, very exceptionally. She had those ringing and very beautiful sounding top notes that sounded like a million chimes just ringing all around. And her stage presence and the Fiaccamilli, I thought was just so engaging, so energetic, so lively, so full of passion, and it was just so addicting to watch. Her aria was very well sung, and her scene with Mantica was absolutely hilarious. Though at times it was supposed to be an erotic scene, but at times it felt hilarious. It was just a lot of fun watching Miss Elmark sing her role and even act her role very beautifully all around. It was just a flawless performance of such a thankless lyric coloratura soprano role. And she definitely delivered the goods. And then we have the role of the fortune teller, sung by German dramatic mezzo Ursula Hesse von den Steinen. Now, the role of the fortune teller basically requires either a dramatic soprano late in her career or even that of a dramatic mezzo. Basically, I prefer a dramatic mezzo singing the role of the fortune teller. and she's supposed to be a great foil to that of Adelaide's deep, low contralto or deeper mezzo voice, whereas with the fortune teller, she basically has a slightly higher mezzo voice. Here, I thought that Miss Hesse von den Steinen was just flawless. It was just a flawless instrument all around. And this was a mezzo who was very well known for basically singing some falcon roles alongside the dramatic mezzo repertoire. I could name many other singers before her that have specialized in a lot of these falcon and dramatic mezzo roles, but the one name that really comes into my mind and definitely shares the similarities with her definitely has to be Christa Ludwig. Because, well, both of them definitely have performed both the mezzo repertoire. Basically, they were both well known in the mezzo repertoire, though at times they ventured into the soprano repertoire. With Hesse von den Steinen's case, she sang the role of the Wozzeck Marie from, well, Wozzeck, excuse me. She basically sang the role of Marie from Berg's Wozzeck in Tokyo one time. And she also sang the role of Giulietta from Tales of Hoffmann. And here she was as the fortune teller, and I thought she was just absolutely flawless. She had such a flawless tone, a very sexy and smoky sounding mezzo voice with great top notes, and her stage presence, though minute as it is, was absolutely engaging. The roles of the servants were actually acted very well, and even the chorus managed to act their parts very, very well, even though they're part of the background or if they're singing. So overall, the singing was absolutely stellar, with the standouts being Jacquelyn Wagner as Arabella, Agneta Eichenholz as Zdenka, Will Hartmann as Matteo, James Rutherford as Mandrika, and Susanna Elmark as the Verkamilli. Actually, everybody did fantastically, whether they be the principal singers, the supporting singers, or even that of the chorus. Everybody did flawlessly, and I thought Mark Albrecht's conducting was just so masterful. It was just wonderful. He basically paid close attention to detail with the music that he was conducting, and he led the orchestra very beautifully. So overall, this was absolutely a great production of Arabella. Thanks to the singers, thanks to the chorus, and thanks to Maestro Albrecht's very, very masterful conducting. Sure, the production can be an acquired taste, but it actually held up. It actually held up to what the libretto says. And for those of you who have an open mind, give this production a chance. You won't be disappointed, especially when you hear such wonderful and very exceptional, masterful singing from Miss Wagner, Miss Eichenholz, Mr. Rutherford, Mr. Hartmann, Mrs. Margiano, Mr. Reiter, Miss Elmark, Miss Hesse von den Steinen, Mr. Ryans, Mr. Smeets, and Mr. Dare. I felt that everybody did exceptionally all throughout. There were no weak links whatsoever. They were all strong and very capable performers. So if you haven't checked this production of Arabella yet, and if you have something to do here in Amsterdam, I highly suggest that you check out this production. I believe that there's still some tickets available. It's basically running until the 11th of May. So don't miss this opportunity. You will not be disappointed. With great singing, a very interesting production, and exceptional conducting, this will definitely be an evening for you. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in to my next two reviews tomorrow. The first one is going to be in the late afternoon, where I'll be reviewing the Radio Philharmonic Orchestra, who are going to be playing at the Concertgebouw. And then later tomorrow evening, I'll be reviewing the Netherlands Philharmonic Orchestra, who are also going to be playing at the Concertgebouw. Until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.